The giant panda is an ancient and mysterious endangered wild animal. Despite having faced countless natural calamities, this species still survives today. They are called living fossils that are unique to China and are also known as peace envoys, loved by people all over the world. Why do giant pandas live only in the western mountainous area in China? What are the mysterious reasons for their 8 million years of survival? Why does a panda weighing over 100 kilograms give birth to a cub that's only 1,000th of its own weight? How do these tiny, fragile cubs survive, and how do people save and protect these species? These questions and many more attract people to explore and research. It is impossible for us to witness the 8 million years of legendary experiences the giant pandas have witnessed. However, we are lucky enough to record the survival of 51 grams, the world's smallest giant panda cub. From its story, we learn that there is a link between the lovely giant panda and the people who live in this beautiful land. All of them are strong against disaster. The story takes place at Chengdu Research Base of Giant Panda Breeding, located in Futoshan, northern suburb of Chengdu, China. It is an organization established in 1987, engaged in scientific conservation, conservation education, and educational tourism, focusing on giant pandas and other endangered wild animals. It is the home of over 60 lovely giant pandas. Behind each giant panda, there is a remarkable story, and each reveals the wonder of life. Today, we share the story of 51 grams. It is the most heartwarming and touching story of them all. It was a hot afternoon, and work proceeded as usual on August the 7th, 2006. Suddenly, the tranquility was broken by the noise of rapid footsteps. The keeper responsible for observing giant panda activities reported that Qi Jin, who had been pregnant for 156 days, was apparently in labor. Our technicians soon tested a collected urine sample. The hormone test results indicated that Qi Jin would probably deliver that afternoon or evening. This was the moment the experts and staff have been waiting for. With considerable effort, they suppressed their nerves and began making preparations for the delivery. It is well known that there are 3 difficulties facing the development of a captive panda breeding program: difficulty with fertility, difficulty in mating, and difficulty in survival. According to a survey, currently there are only 242 captive giant pandas and approximately 1,600 individuals in the wild. Captive breeding of giant pandas began in the 1950s. With unceasing efforts over half a century, the breeding difficulties have been lessened. Even so, there are many unpredictable and uncertain factors in every breeding. Despite behavioral and hormonal changes that seem to indicate a pregnancy, pseudopregnancy and stillbirth still occasionally occur. Before a healthy cub is born, no one can be 100% sure of the outcome. Delivery and rearing are challenges to pandas, especially first-time mothers. Usually, a female who has given birth before is experienced in raising cubs. She will take up the newborn cub and feed them very well. However, first-time mothers might be startled by the newborn's loud cries, and she may abandon or even attack the cub. Thus, the delivery and the moments immediately after are tense and critical periods. At 1608, Qizhen's water broke. A new life was on the way. This was Qizhen's first delivery. With no experience in raising cubs, would she be a qualified mother? The staff's fears were not groundless. Qizhen herself underwent a near-death experience at her own birth. One year before leaving for Japan, the famous giant panda Mei Mei gave birth on September 4th, 1999. Qizhen was Mei Mei's first cub. When she jumped onto the floor, Mei Mei was so startled by this hairless, red-skinned squealing object that she beat the cub repeatedly, cutting the tiny cub and seriously injuring her. The cub's skin was torn open, and she may die at any time. At this crucial moment, an experienced keeper saved the cub from Mei Mei at great risk to herself. No time was lost as the cub was rushed to surgery where vets operated on her. Her wounds required 7 stitches, and as such, people named her Qizhen, which means 7 stitches in Chinese, in memory of this special surgery. Having come full circle from near death to motherhood, what would Qizhen do during her own delivery? At 1703, August the 7th, after strong contractions, Qizhen gave birth to a cub with no difficulties, while the people anxiously waited. In response to the cub's loud cry, Qi held her cub gently in her mouth and cradled it in her arms. Qi was a qualified mother, as are most panda mothers. The staff were relieved as all their concerns and worries about Qi's capability as a mother blew over. "40 minutes later, while everyone was enveloped in an atmosphere of joy, looking at Qi linking her cup, a second cub was born quietly, without ceremony. Qi's body remained unchanged. Due to the quiet birth and the fact that Qi's body obstructed the view, nobody noticed the second cub at first. Then, the staff were astonished to see a small something in front of Qi. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that it was a second cub. It was so tiny and fragile. It was 1/3 the size of a normal cub, and it lay on the ground, motionless. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds passed, and this little creature remained motionless, without making any sound. Was it stillborn? The atmosphere soon became tense. The average newborn weight of a cub is about 120 grams, only 1,000th of its mother's weight, making it the largest weight disparity between adult and infant among mammals. It is known that giant pandas are born prematurely, making survival a challenge. It's very hard for captive panda cubs to survive. On the one hand, a captive panda mother may not be very experienced in raising a cub. On the other hand, a newborn panda cub is very vulnerable to infection and disease. A cub that weighs 1/2 or less than a normal cub, that is to say, less than 70 grams, is usually stillborn. There are few precedents for this situation. Even the very few that are born alive are often too fragile to survive. Was this a stillbirth? Qi took no interest in the second cub. All present felt the atmosphere growing tense and were staring at the floor. To everyone's surprise, the tiny creature lying on the ground suddenly began to move. It was alive, and it kept moving without making a sound. But Qi was fully preoccupied with linking the first cub in her arms. The other cubs struggling on the ground had been totally neglected. The occurrence of twins is about 50% in giant pandas. In the wild, the mother usually chooses to feed the relatively stronger one and abandons the other twin due to physical and environmental restrictions. The sacrifice of an individual to protect the whole population can be seen as an adaptation to survival in their environment. But under the conditions of captivity, in the face of such a rare and endangered species, scientists have been striving to create the same chance of survival for the twin. "30 seconds, 40 seconds. This tiny creature weakly wriggled, but it was too small and weak to cry out to attract its mother's attention. Qi gave no response and kept earnestly linking the first cub. It seemed that Qi was going to give up this miserable life in front of her. Time seemed to stand still. Worry and concern were written all over everyone's faces. If the cub was not rescued from the cage as soon as possible, it could freeze, starve, or even be crushed to death by its mother. Such a thing had happened before. So what to do next? "Take the cub out of the cage," said Zhang Zhihe, the director of the base who had been on scene. And then the intense rescue work began. The keeper quickly picked up a specially made tool and reached for the wriggling cub. If Qi was disturbed by the noise and misunderstood the keeper's intent, she would very likely get agitated and become very aggressive. Both cubs would have been in great danger and the consequences too dreadful to contemplate. The initial attempt failed. Everyone present held their breath, all eyes fixed on the operation. The experienced keeper at the Chengdu Panda base finally threw a net over the tiny creature and managed to remove it from the enclosure. No time could be lost. The tiny cub was quickly taken to the nursery. Taking its temperature and weight was of primary importance to determine its body condition. It was the smallest cub recorded, an unprecedented first in giant panda breeding history. It weighed as much as an egg. It was the lowest birth weight ever recorded. 51 grams, so light and fragile. Would it survive? "51 grams struggled on the ground with much difficulty and could not cry out like its brother. Only its wriggling body was evidence of life. An utterly new and urgent problem now presented itself to the staff. Everyone had a lot in their mind. This tiny creature, weighing only 51 grams, had a body temperature of only 33 degrees Celsius, far below the normal range of 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. The cub was in grave danger. Such a low birth weight is always a threat. coupled with the low body temperature, the situation was extremely grave. 51 grams could die at any time. The staff quickly put it in the incubator. Raising its body temperature was the first obstacle to survival. To raise 51 grams temperature, experts took some bold heating measures. First, the temperature in the incubator was raised 1 or 2 degrees higher than normal. They also used a thicker towel to gently cover 51 grams body, just like a baby tucked in its mother's arms, thus temporarily stabilizing its temperature. Keeping it warm was critical to sustaining life. Additionally, mother's milk, especially colostrums, was very important, as it not only provides basic nutritional requirements, but also supplies critical antibodies necessary for the cub's immune system. Food intake was another obstacle in 51 grams survival. 51 grams urgently needed to be fed and kept warm. Qi saw but neglected 51 grams. Would she be willing to feed this abandoned cub? Furthermore, if Qi refused to nurse the cub, would it be possible for another female panda who had recently delivered, such as Qi, to act as a surrogate mother? The situation was hardly optimistic. The potentially fatal problem was that 51 grams' mouth was smaller than its mother's nipple. Thus, even if Qi or Qi accepted the cub, it would be impossible for 51 grams to suckle. Was there any sort of panda milk substitute available for hen rearing? Staff at the Chengdu Panda Base have conducted many studies into the field of artificial milks for many years. They have carried out experiments with cow, sheep, dog, and even human milk. While the cubs either suffer from diarrhea or are they vulnerable to disease, obviously, the nutrient content of these substitute milks are not suitable for panda cubs, lacking the essential immunity substances necessary for newborns. Thus, obtaining milk from Qi was the only solution. But how does one milk a giant panda? Anesthesia or milking by force may cause stress to the panda and inhibit milk secretion. The quality of the milk could also be affected. While researchers tried to raise 51 grams temperature, another group of experts were busy obtaining colostrum. Under the guidance of a behaviorist, Qi Zhen's keeper fed her honey and got her to stand up. At that point, another expert quietly milked the panda. This method was simple and successful, causing no stress to the panda.
熊猫它是很聪明的，它是可以驯化的。它让我们要让熊猫知道这个挤奶啊是一件很愉快的事情。去一个动作，让这个熊猫站起来，或者是坐下。一方面开始是通过给它吃一点东西来引诱它、刺激它，它觉得这个我这个挤这个奶是没什么对它没有伤害，而且也没有威胁，等于说很舒服，等于说好。那么第二个呢，第二步呢，我们就把这个通过一个动作，通过一个就是说让它不给它吃东西了，它一样的让你挤。
Technicians knew that 51 grams could be saved when they saw the milk drop into the bottle. The milk was offered to the cub, 51 grams, who had suffered from cold and hunger for hours, should have enjoyed a nice meal. However, it was not responsive to the offered milk, a result that was unforeseen by the experts. Obviously, 51 grams was too small and weak. It was not able to suck on its own. Was intubation called for? Would the tiny cub survive the procedure? Ever prepared for the worst, our experts did not give up and continued to work on the problem. The keeper then changed the nipple to the smallest available, a nipple suitable for mice, and it gently opened 51 grams' mouth. This was a delicate procedure because if the milk had entered the windpipe, the consequences would be disastrous. Milk was given and then spat out, and again and again. Through countless careful attempts, 51 grams finally got the first drop of milk down with much difficulty. It was the first time that 51 grams tasted its mother's milk. 0.8 milliliter was given in 40 minutes. For 40 long minutes, the cub struggled between life and death. That 0.8 milliliter it ingested was a small but important step towards winning that battle. As the minutes ticked away, 51 grams temperature increased bit by bit. The people on the spot went through a hard time of 3 hours. Finally, a miracle happened. The body temperature of 51 grams was restored to normal. and its skin had a color. The people had helped this tiny creature escape death. Temporarily, though, the hope of life was there. Night began to fall. The panda nursery house was enveloped in the quiet night. After 10 hours of a life and death struggle, 51 grams survived its initial difficulties in life with the continuous efforts of over 10 technicians. Now, this exhausted creature finally fell into a sound sleep under the good care of its keepers. This is a record book on a giant panda cub's growth at the Chengdu research base of giant panda breeding. Every one of 51 gram survival stories are detailed in it. After weathering the critical stage, this tiny creature suffered from indigestion as a result of too much food intake.
我们在这个鱼印箱里面，我们看那个幼崽，另外看我们自己人工带的这个幼崽，肚子胀啊，肚子胀得很大，胀气，对吧？哎，这怎么排便了？这不知道了。我们又没法，人又没办法给它舔。 哦，就想着，哎呦，只有想办法能不能给它刺激哈，刺激一下。那想到它母亲舌头吧，肯定是很温暖的那种温度嘛，我搞上温热水，慢慢的用这个棉球或者是用纱布，哎，轻轻的怎么刺激，哦，慢慢哦，粪便排了。
Intricate and trivial difficulties like this come one after another. But all are solved by employing years of research on cub rearing techniques. Under the keeper's scrupulous care, the cub grows. According to research data from wild and captive giant pandas, cubs that survive past 6 months can be called successes. Rearing and training panda cubs before 6 months by mothers are of vital importance for the cub's survival, because it is at this stage that they acquire basic life and survival skills. Those that do not receive maternal care early may not grow properly, either physically or behaviorally. So how do we ensure 51 grams successful future, and how do we encourage maternal care by Qizhen? Nine days had passed, and it was time to return the cub to its mother. But by now, would the panda mother recognize the tiny creature? To everybody's surprise, Qizhen instantly recognized her own cub and closely held 51 grams. 51 grams could cry now. There was more hope for 51 grams' successful survival. Along with his twin brother, 51 grams takes turns spending time with his mother, sharing his mother's milk and enjoying the pleasure of staying in his mother's arms. This may seem like the end to the story, but the fight isn't over yet. This picture was taken when 51 grams and his twin brother were born. The brother was 3 times the weight of 51 grams, who closed his eyes and looked extremely fragile. 10 days quickly passed by. He was still smaller than his twin brother, but the rim of his eyes and ear tufts have turned black as he started to exhibit the characteristic markings of a panda. 1 month! The gap between them has narrowed even more as 51 grams grew very fast. After nearly 40 days, both cubs opened their eyes for the first time and reacted to the light. "60 days have passed. There was no difference between 51 gram and his fellow cubs born that year. They were able to crawl now. Can you distinguish 51 grams from the other fuzzy cubs?" How time flies! 180 days and nights have gone by. 51 grams, holder of the smallest birth weight ever recorded, has grown soundly. Its survival set a new record in giant panda breeding history. "51 grams and the scientists are now aiming for a bigger goal, reintroducing pandas to the wild."
野外放生是个很复杂的问题，是个非常复杂、长期和一个系统的一个非常还涉及到很多科学问题、基本问题还没有解决的这样一个系统工程。作为圈养保护，通常说的圈地保护的最终目标，一是建立一个可自我维持的种群，那么另外一个就是让那些种群一些个体在自我维持的情况下，还可以回归到野外去。
We hope this tiny creature, saved from death, who experienced an earthquake measuring 8.0 magnitude, with a strong will, his mother's care, and people's help, may live happily and optimistically in this quake-scarred but still beautiful land. A still brighter future for our motherland lies ahead.